Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 191. The Host.
Welcome into Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm your host, Ken Ray's host, Ken Ray.
And I'm your other host, John Champion's host, John Champion.
Each week, we look at an episode of Star Trek, taking it apart for messages, morals, and meanings, and seeing whether the episode stands the test of time.
This week, the host.
Hey, that's me! And you!
Yeah, right. But I mean also that this episode is called The Host. In a moment, I'm going to bring you a little bit of trivia to the table, but first,
I'm going to tell you how to reach us. Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. If you would like to leave us a voicemail, we would love to hear your voice. You can give us a call, 323-522-5641. That number again, 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, where you can leave other comments, is missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. And with that, on to matters trivial.
All right, today's episode was written by Michel Horvat. Now, not a common name for Star Trek viewers, but his story is really interesting related to this episode. His first production credit is on a low-budget horror movie, and this is his only professional writing credit. Now, some years later, though, he produced and directed a documentary called We Are Dad about a gay couple who adopted kids who were HIV positive. And today, to this very day, he is a marriage and family therapist. So not a professional writer, but he is, in fact, the person who provided this story. And I found it very interesting that he has this sort of wide range of interests and continues to work as a therapist. I thought that was very cool. Now, the original storyline, though, was actually all about negotiations. Literally just all about negotiations. There's no romantic angle with Beverly. That came much later, and a good choice there. Now, this episode is directed by Marvin Rush, and we have talked about Marvin Rush and what a fanboy I am of his work as a cinematographer. This is the first episode of Star Trek that he directed, actually his first ever professional directorial credit. He goes on to direct a few more Star Trek episodes and other series, as well as Hell on Wheels and Turn, but you will see him most frequently behind the camera as director of photography. Now, he started out as a lowly camera operator on WKRP in Cincinnati, then shot episodes of shows like Dear John and the pilot for the TV version of Ferris Bueller before making his way up to be a DP. Now, a little note here about our regular cast. Gates McFadden, as we mentioned before, was pregnant during much of the production of Season 4. Well, here we are with a show that was filmed in mid-March of 1991 and aired in May of 1991. She gave birth to her son James in June of 1991. So much of Marvin Rush's work on this episode revolved around shooting around Gates to hide her pregnancy in an episode that heavily features Gates. Now, we have a little bit of a reference to a previous episode. We have the Tychon's Rift. Well, Picard is reading about it on his computer before talking to Odan in his ready room. You might remember the Tychon's Rift from Night Terrors. Well, that graphic that represented that we actually see on Picard's computer. And we have a mention here of the shuttlecraft Hawking, named after, of course, a famous physicist, Stephen Hawking. This is the same shuttlecraft set used before in Coming of Age. This is the larger of the shuttlecraft sets. Now, we have a few guest stars that I'd like to talk about. We have Barbara Tarbuck as Governor Treon. She has many TV appearances on shows from MASH to Quincy M.E. to Police Squad. And certainly don't forget Quantum Leap, L.A. Law, The New Twilight Zone, and, of course, Moonlighting. It's for you, Ken.
So we'll be talking about her again later.
Yes, we will. Yeah, she's been in movies like Short Circuit and the 2004 Walking Tall. In recent years, she has made guest appearances on Mad Men and had a recurring role on American Horror Story. Suffice to say, she has a massive resume and is constantly working. We will actually talk about her again, not just for the Moonlighting podcast, but she will be back for an episode of Star Trek Enterprise. Now, we also have Nicole Orth Palavicini as Odan number 2, that is Kirill Odan. And she got her start in soap operas and was a regular in All My Children, Jump to Loving, and One Life to Live. She also shows up in Law & Order, Jake and the Fat Man, and the movie Sliver. Finally, we have Frank Lutz, who plays Odan number 1. Well, the first one we meet anyway. He got his start in the theater in the 1970s and then moved on to soap operas with a regular role on The Doctors. Guest appearances followed on shows like Remington Steele, Hunter, The Facts of Life, Baywatch, Jag, and The A-Team. And he appeared in the movie When Harry Met Sally and Don Juan DeMarco. Now, I found it interesting that in his theater career, he was nominated for a Drama Desk Award for playing the sadist dentist Orange Ravello in Little Shop of Horrors.
Get ready for an incredibly exciting episode of The Next Generation. It is absolutely thrilling.
Prologue. Dr. Crusher's personal log, doing some medical work, got a letter from Wesley, who isn't doing so well in ancient philosophies class. He's such a disappointment. But so what? There's someone new in Beverly's life. Let's not waste any time here with coy flirting. Cut straight to making out in the turbo lift. It's Beverly and Ambassador Odan, who clearly excels at personal diplomacy. Interrupting them is Data, who has some details about the Peliar-Zel moons that these two should be studying when they're not locked in an embrace. No problem. Odan fakes a headache while Beverly brushes off Data onto a computer to input his data. The plan is to have the two lovebirds rendezvous in Odan's quarters later, but when he's alone, Odan looks in the mirror, studying intently the growth inside him, pushing away at his stomach. Act 1. Afterglow time. Dr. Crusher and Odan are straightening up after spending some time together. She's got to get back to work, and he's got some time to kill since he can't prepare anymore for negotiating with the Peliar-Zel peace until the Enterprise arrives at their destination. Guess what? We're almost here. Welcome to Peliar-Zel, and welcome to the Federation representative, Governor Leka Trion, who has come aboard with some bad news. Let's set the stage. Generations of settlers have left Peliar-Zel to inhabit the two moons, Alpha and Beta. Odan's father, decades ago, helped quell any infighting. But there's a new threat to the peace. Alpha Moon has figured out a way to use the magnetic field of the planet as a power source, which is all well and good except for the fact that it is causing serious climate change on Beta Moon. The Alphans won't budge, and that will kill the Betans. At an impasse, both sides preparing for war. As they're getting closer, Odan says he will take a shuttle to the planet, definitely not beamed down, as Picard suggested, even though it's not safe, what with the infighting, so he can meet with representatives from both sides. With everyone out of the room, Deanna confides in Picard that there's something weird about Odan. His emotions are unpredictable and kind of all over the place. Picard says there's so little about the Trill, that's what he is, that they know. Later in the Enterprise beauty salon, Deanna walks in on Beverly, who seems a bit out of place. She's not a regular here, and this time she's soaking in it. Here's a good rule of thumb. Don't try to lie to an empath. Deanna's aware, everyone is aware, Dr. Crusher is in love. But how well does she know Odan? Well enough to know that she likes the way she feels with him. Before his mission to Peliar-Zel, Picard meets with Odan. Odan says he works on instinct. It's less about going in with a strategy, but the Enterprise staff has been very helpful in providing background information, especially that Dr. Beverly Crusher. In fact, Odan wants to know if Picard has any inkling that Beverly might be interested in leaving Starfleet. Before awkward can get even more awkward, the call comes that Odan's shuttle is ready. When he arrives in the shuttle bay, Riker is there to pilot, and Beverly is there to see them away. Odan has even brought a rose, a customary gesture of love among Earthlings, he's learned. With the shuttle away, In mere seconds, an unidentified ship from one of the moons approaches and opens fire. One hit knocks out part of the shuttle systems and injures Odon. When Picard orders that the two beam back to the Enterprise, Odon refuses, saying that the transporter will kill him. Riker pilots them in manually, but Odon has got to get to sickbay fast. He's alive, but barely. His body is acting strangely, with his metabolic processes all over the map. It's as if a parasite is at work, and that is precisely what is going on. That parasite in Odon's stomach is Odon. Act 2. The host body has died. After Odon could say goodbye to Beverly, but not before it could tell Quaid to start the reactor. With the parasitic life form, the symbiont, in stasis, the Trill are sending another host body, which will reach the Enterprise in some 40 hours. It's too late. The negotiations must continue, and Odon will need to be placed in another host body within an hour or two to survive. Data offers, but his circuitry is a bad match. Riker steps up, though. He's willing to take the risk. It is, after all, his business. He'll play host to Odon, since it is a far better option than allowing total war to break out among Palear-Zel. Procedure is messy, but a success. The Odon symbiont makes a new home in Riker's gut, and Riker is taking it about as well as a human body can be expected to now host an alien being, which is to say, not entirely well. His heart rate and blood pressure are fluctuating, his brain functions erratic, but then things seem to level off. Beverly asks Will how he's doing, but the answer that comes back is a little more familiar than First Officer has with the doctor. It's Riker's voice, but the words are Odon's, telling Dr. Beverly that she looks tired. Act 3. Odon, in the body of Riker, now addresses Governor Trion. She must convince the delegates that this person in front of her is Odon, even if he looks different. In fact, decades ago, it was the same Odon, not his father, in a different host body who brokered their peace. She'll do what she can. Riker's host body isn't doing too well. Humans weren't made for this kind of interaction, and it's time for Odon to get some rest. Beverly attends to Odon, and she's a little cold, feeling hurt by Odon not being entirely upfront with her about who he is. It looks like Riker, but again, the words are Odon's. He's still the same person who fell in love with her. Later in 10 Forward, Beverly is joined by Deanna. Beverly tells a story about a schoolgirl crush on a boy, Stefan, who never even knew she existed. It was all a child's fantasy of what it meant to be in love. Now she's dealing with the feeling of loss, and that she fell in love with a version of Odon that is no longer Odon. Now he's in the image of Will Riker, someone she sees as a colleague, not a romantic partner. She wishes this whole thing had never happened, and just then Odon walks into 10 Forward as well. Beverly can't even face him, but Deanna tells the story of missing her father and what she wouldn't do to feel his embrace again. Beverly has to accept that this is what Odon looks like now, and should go to him. Act 4. Riker's body isn't doing too well with Odon inside, but they'll have to rally just enough to greet the delegates from Palear-Zel's Alpha and Beta moons. He doesn't look like what they expected, but Odon knows the inside information about the last round of talks, the Beta representative's aunt who spoke for them, and the Alpha representative who is here now, Kalen Tros. It was a clever strategy back then, getting a representative from each side to live with the other for a week to gain new perspective. Kalen is impressed, but skeptical still until Odon reveals the little-known plot that would have assassinated the Beta delegate, uncovered by Kalen himself. With his identity approved, the delegates agree to at least think about it. The deadline is 8 hours. Beverly is doing what she can to keep Riker's body healthy enough. His body is rejecting the foreign organism inside, and an immunosuppressant with some painkillers will help, for now. Beverly is still having trouble accepting Odon in this form, and she shies away when he tries to touch her. The talks are on, again, tentatively. In the meantime, Picard informs Odon that the new body is on its way. He'll just have to make do until then. In her quarters, Beverly has a cup of tea, contemplating the rose Odon gave to her, until she is compelled to check with Odon. The awkward business talk only goes so far until the two find themselves in a passionate embrace. Act 5. The peace talks are about to start, and the stakes are high. Each side is amassing troops while Odon's health is failing more rapidly. He agrees to work through the meetings, but then he tells Beverly that he must be removed from Riker's body at the end, even if the new host body has not arrived. It's not fair to Riker. Okay, it's showtime. The delegates are ready, and as Odon leaves, Picard expresses his deep concern for Beverly, regardless of the outcome. Hope you weren't expecting a blow-by-blow of deep-level moon negotiations. The talk, after 6 hours, are done. War is averted, but Odon collapses on the bridge. The worst news is that the Trill have been held up, and it will be another 9 hours before they can rendezvous with the Enterprise. Get those representatives off the ship. Time to take the Enterprise to Warp 9 to intercept the Trill vessel. Meanwhile, Beverly has given her word to remove Odon from Riker. Riker will be all right. As for Odon, he's under glass, in stasis again, and he'll be fine for now. The host had better arrive soon, though. A few hours later, the Trill host arrives, escorted by Worf. This time the host is a she, not a he, and that gives Beverly a moment of pause. The procedure is a success, and Odon, in a brand new female body, comes in to talk to the doctor, expressing deep gratitude and, yes, the sincere love he had for her before. As for Beverly, she just can't even. She can't keep up with these changes. What if this host doesn't last either? Or what about the one after that? She says she can't live with the uncertainty and that perhaps someday our ability to love won't be so limited. Odon rises to leave, but before that kisses Beverly's hand and says she will never forget her. The end.
Boy, the personal log's really personal, huh?
Yeah, you have to wonder how much of that is regulation.
Yeah, dear personal log. Wesley, by the way, I worry about your future children. I don't know if you plan to have any. I think you don't. But I worry about them if you do. Well, because, I mean, she actually led off with Wesley is top of his class in something, but he's having a problem in this other thing. And your recap began, boy, Wesley sucks at this one thing.
Yeah. Well, that's the impression that I got. You know, Wesley is the top of his class, but she's like, oh, really? Does that need to be in a personal log? Because it's going to be on a report card. Well, she just, I felt her disappointment.
I'm not talking, see, I did not hear her disappointment at all. I think she was just saying, here's what's happening with my son. He's doing great in this one thing. He's doing not so well in this other thing. But Daddy Champion comes in and he's like, well, my son stinks at this one thing. How's he doing in the other stuff? Who cares about the other stuff? Did I mention where he sucks? Yeah.
Wesley is special. Okay, so we have to make sure that we hold him to that standard.
Here's the other thing.
Very special.
Okay, but going back, so like I've talked on this show before, I journal.
Okay, yeah.
That's for nobody but me.
Right.
Is the personal log a requirement of Starfleet, or is this like where your boss hands you a smartphone and you start using it for everything, even though it's really for business? Are you required to keep a personal log? And if you are, is it really a personal log at that point?
Right.
And would you not leave out the fact, oh, there's a new person on the ship, and I'm like totally, happy that they're here. Yeah. Sometimes several times a day.
It's in the Enterprise computer, I have to assume. Yeah. All of that is in the Enterprise computer.
Right.
Yeah. And even if it's locked, I still feel like if you learned anything from Geordie LaForge and Leah Brahms, that information is just a step away from being opened up to create an avatar.
It might solve things, actually.
It might. I do have to say that Beverly and Odon's infatuation, it actually plays out really nicely and in a non-cheesy way. It is kind of fun.
Yes. Yeah, I have no problem with their relationship in this episode.
Yeah, it feels adult and it feels real, and I like it.
And it's neat to see Gates McFadden get to do something.
Yes, absolutely. By the way, we don't talk politics on this show, so don't say global warming. Okay. Unless it's in the context of science fiction, then it's okay. So, yes, they're having global warming.
In a weird way.
Yeah, it is a weird way.
Yeah, not in the way you normally think about people getting global warming, if people actually do, which, of course, is debatable.
I said don't say global warming.
By some people. I didn't. You started it.
Just to say don't to say it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hello,
I must be going. Mm-hmm. I thought the way that what's the name of the planet that the moons are around?
Peliarzel,
okay.
Lovely place in the summer.
First of all, they should not have named the moons Alpha and Beta. Or once people started going there, they shouldn't have named them Alpha and Beta, because that's just going to lead to a fight.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I would come up with different names, names from their pantheons, if they have any, or names of their top celebrities, maybe. whatever. But, you know, you say alpha and you say beta, and you're pretty much itching for a fight.
Yeah.
What I thought was really interesting about Billy Arzel, though, is they say, the governor says, we try to help them settle their arguments by not taking sides, but this time we are at a loss. Just so I'm clear, we try to help by not doing anything, but that hasn't worked. So now we don't know what to do. Yeah. Yeah, because we tried doing nothing, and now we may have to do something.
Right.
But we don't know what.
It's a really good strategy.
Well, usually.
If you didn't learn from this episode, it's a very good strategy. Yeah. In the spa, by the way, the Enterprise has a spa.
Yeah.
Which looks a lot like the barbershop.
I assumed it was the barbershop.
Yeah, well, redressed.
Salon, let's say.
Salon, yeah. But it definitely a bit of a throwback to that workout conversation that Deanna and Dr. Crusher had during the Price about Deanna's love life.
Yes.
So kind of nice that they share this bond, and certainly not as awkward as the workout scene.
No, not nearly.
No. But what I really liked the conversation in 10 Forward.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite good, and it felt very personal and meant just another moment for Gates to really shine in that role.
Yeah, what's funny, though, is I really thought, when they were talking about it and then Deanna got up and came around the table, I thought she was going to say, touch Will Riker and I will cut you.
Yeah, right. There is something a little weird about that.
Came around the table, and I was like, I know that's not the way this is going to go, but boy, does it look like that's the way it's going to go. So I guess the first officer's body is sort of disposable to Deanna. Speaking of which, so are first officers, apparently, in this episode. Because Will's like, I'll fly the shuttle through, what can end up being a war zone. That's no problem at all. And, if Picard tried that, Riker would be like, holding a knife to his own throat going, you leave and I'll do it.
Right.
But no, it's like Will wants to go. He's like, okay, fine. And then he's like, I'll go through this radical procedure that might leave me dead. And everybody's like, okay. I'm thinking this would have been a great chance for some, potato peeling something or other below decks to get a little FaceTime up above, right?
Maybe. Or you know what? Just bring back Simon Tarsus. That guy needs something to do.
I can't remember even who that is now.
From the Drumhead. That poor 1/4 Romulan
that's
kid.
That's right. Yeah. Simon Tarsus, yes. Yeah, no, he's had enough screen time. Seriously, dude. I'm looking to get above decks, okay? Or you. Okay. I'm fine if it's you as well.
All right, fine.
As long as you come back and tell me stuff. And if either of us dies, that's like what? So like 10,099 people, any one of whom could peel potatoes.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
Very true, yeah. There's a moment where Picard asks the computer what time it is.
Huh.
Yeah, and they're on the bridge, and the computer, what time is it? And it's like 17:33 or whatever. And I thought, if only they were on the Enterprise during Star Trek VI. There's literally a clock everywhere you look.
That's true.
You cannot move without seeing a clock.
Yeah, they got a good deal on those.
Yeah, they did.
I'm guessing the set designers or the set decorators or whatever they're called, the props people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, I didn't mention that in the spa salon / barbershop. What's the deal with Bolian barbers? Is that the only thing they're known for? We've only met another Bolian in a different context one other time, but every other Bolian since then has been a barber.
Well, you see, I assume that this was the same barber that was giving Geordi grief. That's why I thought it was actually the same barber shop or the same salon.
No. Different Bolian. You gotta know your Bolians.
How do you know it's a different Bolian? He's like blurry in the background.
Well, he's a blurry Bolian. The other Bolian is a non-blurry Bolian.
That's true. He was sharp. He was like 1028p or 1080p. Excuse me. 1080p. He was pretty good. All right, I'll give you that. Hey, here's a dumb thing. It's not really so dumb, I don't think, but it's kind of dumb. I get stuck on the tech stuff. I don't know if you know this about me. I found myself wondering about privacy on the Enterprise and how privacy settings might be tricked. So, like in Act 4, Odon asks the computer... Is it Odon or Odan, by the way? It's Odon, right?
I think it's Odon.
It's like Udon.
Yeah.
But different.
Only different.
Yeah, okay. Unless somebody else says Odan, in which case nobody bats an eye. So in Act 4, Odon asks the computer for the location of Dr. Beverly Crusher, and the computer tells him. And what I'm wondering is, does the computer know that it's telling Odon at that point? Or does it assume that it's telling Riker? And then I had to wonder, okay, is that just like a rank thing? Like if Riker said, where's Captain Picard? Would the computer be like, you see, because he outranks you, so maybe I can't tell you? Whereas if some guy peeling potatoes says, hey, where's Captain Picard? I mean, they wouldn't tell us then. I mean, I could find out where you are, and that's about it. Here's what I was actually thinking about. So let's say it was Reg Barclay.
Yeah.
Reg hadn't found his respite in the holodeck, right? And so instead, he's fixating on and eventually stalking the real Counselor Troy. Do they have a thing where she can choose to share or with whom she shares, or is it a hierarchy thing, or are we all good because we all have communicators? It just struck me as odd that, this alien entity, granted, sounding and looking exactly like Riker, but not in Riker's quarters at that point. They're like, oh, take the ambassador back to his quarters. Okay, which ones are those? Because the clothes in his quarters won't actually fit him. We made it a drop by Riker's place and get something that will.
Yeah, I wondered about that too, because I noticed that early on, Odon had his own communicator, and I figured, well, the computer is tracking him by that. So when Odon goes into Will Riker's body, they take Riker's communicator badge away and they stick on Odon. So then the computer knows, okay, at least this communicator badge belongs to Odon, not Riker. But as soon as Riker talks, and we know that the computer can recognize voice,
right?
Then that presents a little bit of a problem.
Yes.
So I didn't know exactly how that would work, but they figured it out. They did. They got it completely worked out.
Okay. Except for the part where the computer's just telling this random guy where everybody is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Just checking.
Yep. So we meet the Trill in this episode. We will, of course, see more of them in Star Trek yet to come.
What?
Well, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
Right.
But for now, it's an interesting idea of a symbiotic relationship. And I wonder, just as you kind of got stuck on the privacy issue with the Enterprise computer, I kind of got stuck on who these hosts are. Mm-hmm. Because at least when you put a Trill in a human body, well, the human entity sort of goes away.
Yeah.
Will Riker is sort of asleep. But here is a walking, talking, bipedal humanoid being that showed up saying, hey, I'm ready for my Trill implant. I'm ready for my symbiont. Mm-hmm. Well, what did that person do before they got there? Did they go to school? Did they, did they have a husband or a wife? Did they, did they do very well at ancient philosophies when they were in school? What happens to that mind when you've got a little Odon living inside of you?
So I've got 3 words for you on this.
Okay.
Renew, renew, renew.
Oh.
I actually did wonder if it was the resolution for the hosts. Which I don't think it really necessarily is, because I don't think when you get to 30 or 21 or whatever the age, 60, definitely not 60 in this case, but I did wonder about that myself, like, who is this person, and do they get to, or is this a person, and do they get to the time where they have to be, become the host and say, well, had a good life, everybody gather around, because next time you see me, no, you won't.
Yeah. Right.
I did love, though, like the explanation when Riker body is standing up there, saying, the man they knew as my father, the man who stands before them, both are merely meat puppets.
Right.
Don't worry about them. They're just whatever. I will say, though, the symbiont, very colorful.
Oh, yeah.
In places. And also looks a tremendous amount like the thing that Khan put in Chekhov's here in Wrath of Khan.
A little bigger.
In fact, I wondered if, left to their own devices, would the thing on Ceti Alpha 5 have evolved into the Trill? Or did it? Like, would the Trill look at that and go, oh, man, can you believe that's actually what we were? Yeah. But scientists know. They found the fossils.
So they're really just very pleasant intellectual beings.
Eventually. Yeah.
Right.
You wouldn't want to have a chimpanzee over for dinner right now. So I don't know.
I might. You don't know how I like to eat. Yeah.
Well, you go right ahead.
Yeah. You mentioned renew. And it made me think that the laser scalpel that Beverly uses, she cuts open Riker and then uses that thing to sort of seal him up, and there's no scar. I thought of Logan's Run. That was a great thing in the New U. For those of you who haven't seen it, the plastic surgery center, New U, and they use kind of the same idea. Hey, look, we can cut you open and we can seal you right back up. It's pretty good. What should Troy think about Beverly's conundrum with Riker? You know, we're saying it for a moment there. Yeah, he's Odon all right, so do whatever you want with that body for now.
Right.
For now.
Yeah. You know what I actually found myself thinking, because Riker's apparently going to have no memory, or we don't know that, and I doubt they're ever going to talk about it again. Maybe they will. I hope they will. I doubt they will.
I would want to talk to somebody about it.
Yeah.
If for a couple of days I was not me and I had a thing living inside me that was pulling the strings of the meat puppet.
Pull the strings! Pull the strings! No. What I'm thinking, though, is I just would like to know if Riker actually remembers anything. Let's address that if we could. Because here's the other thing. And I made the joke last week about how Timothy was going to see everything. Yeah. Beverly from now on knows about Riker. And she doesn't know. She may not know technique. She may not know form. She may not know what he says or even the faces he makes. But on a very real level, she's got an idea of what's going on.
She's a doctor. She's seen it all. She's seen it all.
She's seen everything.
She already cut him open. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But seriously though, what a nice tender scene between Picard and Beverly.
Yeah.
They just sort of skirt that line about their relationship and their feelings for each other. And in a show that is full of great adult moments, I think that's one of the best. We talked before about the Picard-Beverly relationship and how Patrick Stewart had written that in a memo to Gene Roddenberry to say, hey, we've sort of always played it like we had this relationship, so how do we explore that? Can this be explored down the road for these characters? And I thought this put kind of a nice button on it without hitting you over the head.
Interested in a deeper understanding of the episode, The Host? You are soaking in it.
Ken, I said before that there are a couple of words that we really shouldn't dive too deeply into global warming, which I won't say because we don't want to talk about that on this show. But I did find that there was an interesting other kind of present-day political topic here. People unwilling to give up certain sources of energy, even if there's a detrimental effect on others. Fortunately, again, there's nothing topical or political here, so we can move on without comment, right?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So let's talk about what this episode was really about.
Really? You're gonna leave it there, really?
Well, I mean, I don't know how much more of it there is to say. I think that the Star Trek they were able to boil down a problem into just a few sentences and say, hey, you see where this planet is going? You see what their problems are? This is created by the people who are there, and now they're about to kill each other over it.
Let me ask you a question. When you say that the original episode was going to be all about negotiation, was it going to be all about negotiation showing this kind of fight? I mean, I think back to, like, we, not you and I, but people call Star Trek 4 the Save the Whales movie, right?
Yeah.
And it's not entirely a Save the Whales movie. I mean, certainly there's the whole thing with Jillian. There's the Spock coming back to himself. There's a tremendous amount of comedy. But ultimately, it's seen to have an eco message, because if we don't take care of the environment or take care of the things, if we're not good stewards, let's say, of the planet and the things that live on it, we're going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really what Star Trek 4 boils down to. You've got kind of this eco message very much in the background of this episode.
Yeah.
Do you know, like, were the negotiations supposed to be hashing out like an eco message, or were the negotiations about, I mean, do you know if that had more of an eco message when it was initially a story?
I see what you're saying. I don't know the details about that. What I do know is just that the focus was on Odon as the deliberator.
Okay.
You know, it was on just the idea, sort of like when you go back to Loud as a Whisper, just the idea that this guy has a process and he tries to make two sides see each other for the people that they are and make them come to a resolution. It wasn't about hammering out the right or wrong.
Okay. So even if this episode had been about an ecological fight, it still wouldn't have been an eco episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating.
That's my understanding.
All right.
Yeah. Now there may be another draft that is very different, but yeah. But if it's not the Save the Whales movie or the Save the Whales episode, that is something that Star Trek does do from time to time. It'll just sort of float the topic out there and say, oh yeah, this thing that you're talking about now, this other planet in the future is talking about it as well.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's a real thing. And I think that's sort of a clever way of doing it without just hitting you over the head.
Without being bonk, bonk on the head, you might say.
One might say bonk, bonk on the head.
Yes. Several times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing that this episode is a great exploration of love, the nature of love, and what that actually means to the individuals who are in love. I thought there was actually a good parallel here to Metamorphosis from the original series. The form of that being, something that was in love with Zefram Cochrane and not really able to reveal itself or its intention until later, until it turned into that other form.
Well, it never actually revealed itself to Zefram Cochrane until it ended up in... Until it ended up inhabiting Miss Ellie?
Yeah.
Was that her name? No, it was Ellie.
Right.
It was Ellie something. Miss Ellie was from Dallas. It was Ellie something
yes.
from Andy Griffith.
Yeah.
Somebody else sees that where Zefram Cochrane didn't. I mean, there's a difference here. I kind of get what you're saying, although I'm troubled by the fact that Odon lies so readily about all of this stuff. He lies to the representative of the planet about being the son of Odon rather than the symbiont. And then, that really makes his argument to Beverly, hey, I'm just two beings like everybody on my planet. You didn't tell me you were one being. So, see, it's the same thing. That's just not true. I mean, whether it's because and look, if you go science fiction-y, there was a role-playing game years ago that had changelings in it, and I guess this is something that might turn up in Star Trek again someday as well. Mm-hmm. But there were these changelings, and they could basically be anything. They had sort of a gooey look normally, but they could transform themselves into just about anything or anyone. And so they were hunted almost to extinction in this role-playing game because you couldn't know. I mean, unless all these things were dead, you couldn't know that the person you were talking to is actually the person that you're talking to, right? It could be somebody pretending to be them. Maybe this is the reason the Trill have never said who they actually are, because we actually just saw in this episode how a Trill could be second in command or first officer of a starship, which I guess means a Trill could also be captain of a starship, which I guess means they could also be president of the Federation, or they could be anybody. So maybe there's a reason the Trill have kept all this quiet.
Right.
But I mean, I'm having trouble seeing the Metamorphosis thing, because the Metamorphosis thing, I mean, that thing was what it was. And it was also in love.
Yeah.
The Trill here, this guy knows what he is and is doing nothing about letting anybody else know. In fact, apparently the whole race is like, hey, by the way, if you leave the planet, sort of keep it to yourself that you're a symbiont, because we don't really want the galaxy to know.
Well, I did really wonder about that, because the thought that these beings have evolved over however many thousands or millions of years to be that. He basically says it to Beverly, well, you wouldn't think to bring it up that you are one being just because that's who you are. That's how you are.
Right.
But by the same token, the Trill shouldn't be necessarily hiding that's what they are, particularly if they are members of the Federation, or they've had this sort of at least Federation contact on a deep level. Yeah. Just having medical information of any sort is going to be helpful. Yeah. It seems like the kind of thing that would actually come up. Oh, well, see, humans, we got a heart here, and we got lungs here, and we got a stomach here, and the Trill. Oh, okay, well, you got a heart here and lungs here. Oh, and you got a thing there that's doing all the thinking for you.
Who's that little guy?
So,
yeah.
Okay.
All of the Trill are pregnant.
Right.
Apparently,
right.
I don't know.
With a giant sea cucumber.
Yeah, I guess. It's like one of those little things from Star Trek 2.
Right. Well, I think the thing about Metamorphosis that I came back to is that thematically there's this idea that the love that these beings have that is not limited by, or at least we as the audience are led to think should not be limited by, their physical form. The being in Metamorphosis was sort of desperately in love with Zefram Cochrane. Zefram Cochrane was offended at the idea that this being was sort of seeing him as that, until he could get past it and get to the being in a human female form.
Right.
And, we might be able to talk about that. But I think this is another ball of wax here in the respect that, we've talked about whether or not Star Trek could or should, or how they would approach the idea of homosexuality. And this has been an ongoing debate in Star Trek for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I was asking myself, should we think that there is anything homophobic about Beverly's reaction to the female Trill at the end? And I thought, Beverly isn't required to make any sort of political statement about who she dates or who she falls in love with or hangs out with as a friend. She is allowed to have preferences. Mm-hmm. If that Trill lived in a being that was a 6-foot-tall squid, she has every right to say, my preference is that the person that I date and marry potentially does not look like a 6-foot-tall squid. It's just something I sort of can't get past.
No. Dude, why not Zoidberg?
Why not Zoidberg?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But I wondered if there was anything at all. I felt like by the time we got to the end of this episode, there was only one way for this to go, with the Trill going from one body to another body that Beverly was having certainly strong reservations about, because she recognized that body as someone else. And I thought, well, the only way for this to go at the end is to have the Trill go into something or somebody else that is completely the opposite of what she wants. And in this case, it happened to be a female. Now, she sort of rationalized it by saying, I don't know what else you might turn into. What if a year goes by and then it's another, and then another year goes by and it's another? How long do these symbiotic relationships last? We don't really know. But they seem to be pretty fragile in some respect. So she has an out in that respect to say that emotionally she can't handle the idea of this being jumping from one body to another, and her not having any way of knowing, unless you go to their home planet and Beverly gets to walk through maybe the Trill, I don't know if they have like a nursery or something for these, and say, I like the look of that one. Hey, next time, why don't you grab that body?
Yeah, except I don't get the impression that they're nearly as fragile as you think they are. I mean, he was able to plausibly tell them, yeah, no, the last Trill that was here was my dad. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if he hadn't blown up in the shuttle, then, or if he hadn't gotten, hit in the shuttle, then he and Beverly theoretically could have lived out what would, for Beverly, have been a natural life. Mm-hmm. And then she passes away, and then he quickly jumps into another body, I suppose, or waits until his host body is about to die, and then goes away. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things about this episode that are odd to me. I don't think it's homophobic of her to not be open to a homosexual relationship herself. There's a difference between homophobia and, as you say, just like, it's not really for me.
Yeah, it's a matter of preference.
There are a couple of things that I wondered. I mean, first of all, I guess I do wonder, when is it a person's responsibility or a race's responsibility to tell you everything about themselves? We marveled at the fact that the Federation didn't know about Pon farr.
Yeah, right.
All the way back in the original series, but apparently it's never been an issue. The first time it actually became an issue was in that episode. And so, and we were talking, I can't even remember. Oh, it's because as we record this, we just hit the anniversary of Star Trek V. Mm-hmm. And somebody suggested that we go back and listen to the thing in Star Trek V. And we talked about the fact that Spock revealed things on a need-to-know basis, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, they never talked about Pon farr. Okay, that's fine, because nobody's needed to know about that to this point. Once what's his name, whose name totally escapes me right now, the guy that the show's about, the Trill.
Yes.
What's
Odon.
his name? Odon. Good
Yes.
Lord, what is wrong with me? Once Odon enters into a relationship, or even thinks he might be entering into a relationship with Beverly, that's probably the time to maybe tell her a couple of things. I mean, you either say, look, I'm on this ship for 12 days. I want them to be an awesome 12 days. Let's not talk about anything past these 12 days. Or if you think that there's going to be a relationship, then you start to say, hey, by the way, I'm two people. No, I don't just mean sometimes I have mood swings. I mean, I'm literally two people. There's the guy you see in front of you, and then watch what I can do with my tummy. Right?
Yeah, right. Right.
The thing that I hate about this episode, and not enough that I don't watch it or anything like that, but I'm having trouble making a real world analog with any sort of authority. Like I wondered. I don't have the proper terminology, and I know you and I have actually been called out for using the terminology incorrectly. So let me just start by saying I know that I don't know what I'm talking about, and this is actually part of the problem that I have with this episode. Let's say you come home one day and your parent or your spouse was wearing clothes and carrying themselves in a manner different from the gender that you knew them as, or that you sort of presented growing up. So you come home and dad's wearing a dress, right?
Yeah,
that would be jarring. Or mom is sporting a mustache. I don't know what the analogs are. And I'm not trying to make light of it. What I'm saying is you come into that situation, that would be an incredibly jarring thing, and yet they are still the same person. They look different. They're no longer exactly what you knew or what you thought you knew, but they're still exactly, who you knew. And even if that doesn't feel like what's going on with the Trill, because my assumption is that the person in this situation that I just made up wouldn't have known, or maybe had tried to sort of fight that, which there are people in my family who were homosexual and knew that they were homosexual and tried not to be. I mean, everything from I just don't want to be to going to church camps that tried to change it, right?
Yeah.
My assumption is, generally speaking, somebody who becomes, I don't even like the terms, like I say, but like a man who is suddenly, out in the world as a woman, past a certain point, my assumption is they either didn't realize or didn't want to know for a very long time. None of that is the case with Odon. He knew exactly who or what he was. And, not to be all Seinfeld about it, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with either of them, except that Odon was lying. I mean, the Trill as a race are if they're not lying, they're not being completely forthcoming. And that's, it's fine that you don't, except if you come to a place where somebody might need to know, then you should. I don't think everybody needs to walk around saying everything about themselves. I mean, because this could also go to, like, what's your kink? You don't have to wear everything that you are on your sleeve. You don't have to be out. I mean, you can be how you want to be, but if you start entering into relationships where that stuff might actually matter to somebody else, then you should probably talk about that or address it. And yet you still don't have to tell everybody. I mean, he could have told, Beverly, once he started getting serious, hey, if you could just sort of keep this between you and me, look what I can do with my tummy. And maybe she would have, and maybe she would have been okay with it. She had a right to know, I think.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. This is something that's got to come up at least by the third date.
You'd think so.
It really
Especially
does.
if you're like, hey, what do you think she would think about leaving her career and everyone she knows and coming to live with me? Okay, really, if you're asking her boss that question, you might actually want to ask her, say, hey, what would you think if suddenly I looked like somebody completely different? No, I'm not thinking of getting a haircut, even though I should.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I might look like somebody completely different. Now, I will say, I did point out to my wife as we were watching this episode that like this is a great training for her for when I get my robot body.
Yes.
Yeah. She seemed really pleased that I brought that up.
In the words of the Great Blues song, the Trill is gone. Time now to sort out what messages and ideas were left in its wake.
All right, Ken Ray, host Ken Ray, and whoever else is living inside there.
Hello.
We want to hear your final summation of The Host. And first of all, whether or not this episode stands up. So how do you feel about, does the host hold up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, I feel like there's a good chance that I displayed a tremendous amount of ignorance the last segment, and I will, I guess, continue to do so here. I mean, it gave me a lot to think about. It made me wonder about real-world analogs. It's also, I mean, it's a great Gates McFadden episode. It really is. I like this Gates McFadden much more than the one in Data's Day. I mean, it was sort of fun seeing her be playful in Data's Day, and yes, it was neat to see that she could dance, but there's more range for her. There's not a tremendous amount of range in this episode, but this is an area that we've not actually seen her character go. It doesn't seem to me, or at least not as fully. So that was great. And the background seemed plausible. The whole, the whole negotiation thing between the two planets. I like the fact that they, sort of drop a little knowledge on you in the background, or at least drop some things to think about in the background. But that's not the bonk bonk on the head message. Yeah. So yeah, I would say it holds up. What about you?
Yeah, it's definitely up there. There's great character development. And there's a very Star Trek feel to all of this when it comes to exploring strange new life and ultimately forcing us to look at ourselves. That's the great arc here for Beverly. She's got to examine what she thinks love is and who she thinks she's in love with. And like I said, the thing that I love here is that it all plays out in a plausible, for science fiction, a plausible adult way. These are people dealing with real emotions here, even if the context is the fantastical science fiction construct.
The one way that I might fault it, and I think it's sort of what you were talking about, and maybe it would have been better if they had, if he had ended up being Bem in the end, except we're supposed to think that they're going to be some sort of humanized, sort of fairly human-looking thing, right? Would have been better if it had been Zoidberg in a way, because then we could have addressed the question of, okay, but what if, because then the question could have been, okay, well, what if it had not been a bug-eyed monster, but what if it had been a woman? Oh, well, then we could really think about that. It's sort of a bummer that we're at the end of the 48 minutes, we have to find a way to break this cleanly, and then somebody said, well, obviously Beverly is not going to be in love with a woman. So that's how we end it. We'll make it so that no way she's going to be in a relationship. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's kind of it's kind of a bummer. I know you couldn't do the bug-eyed monster thing, although maybe it would have been better to. Although then there's too much of a chance that it devolves into comedy at the end. A roll of the eyes when the thing with the 8 tentacles leaves.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing that's difficult about this episode is that I don't think there is anything intentionally homophobic about it at all.
Right.
But when you have that ending, then you sort of say, well, is there something unintentional here that feels a little out of step for Star Trek? But again, Beverly as a character, we're applying these sort of real world traits to this character. Beverly as a person would get to make that call. Beverly would get to say, these are my preferences. This is where I can go or can't go in a relationship. Even if I can accept the idea that this is a little, slug living inside a body.
Right.
And be okay with that at all. When maybe she could wrap her head around that being Odon in the first Odon body that we saw. But there is something about that I think you do have to address to say, well, when we get to the end and it is a woman and Beverly turns her down, well, like you said, we know that we can't have Beverly carry on a relationship anyway with a guest star.
Right.
That's sort of the reality of the production of the show.
See, what would be fascinating to study, though, is if she were in a relationship for quite a while and then all of a sudden there was that different body and she had to get to know like that.
Yeah.
That's a nutty idea. I can't even imagine a storyline like that in any Star Trek ever happening ever.
Ever
again. I mean, here's the thing. It is a lot. What did you say in the recap? Beverly can't even...
She can't even.
Yeah, okay, so
she
first,
just can't even.
Okay, not only has she had to deal with the fact that this thing has been in 3 different bodies, but she also has to deal with the lie of the whole thing. I mean, the whole thing really was predicated. I mean, if he's thinking rest of my life stuff, this is the kind of thing he ought to tell her. And you can make this... And wow, maybe it is bad that she just totally shuts her down at the end, because then I'm thinking about, okay, let's say you were in love with somebody and you don't find out until you're almost married that they were raised a religion, that you were raised to hate that religion, or let's say they're a different race and they look just like you, but it turns out they're part this thing. And you would hope that if they were, part that thing, but you're in love with them, well, then what do you care? Stuff like that doesn't matter. But then, on the other hand, there are biological imperatives that some people feel that others don't. I mean, I can't figure out how to say this without being crass. She may need to be held by a man. I mean, there may be a thing in her that she feels like, I like guys. I mean, it's like you said earlier, she gets to choose. I like guys or I like girls. I mean, it'd be just as bad, I suppose, to try to force somebody who's gay to be like, no, you like women. Young man, you like women, even though you think you don't. I mean, I guess it would be wrong to assume that if it's not a choice, it's not a choice. And yet, we're so, this is, it's just like a giant, this is getting messier the further we go into talking about it.
But this is what's cool, because when we talk about messages, morals, meanings here, the thing that I find most fascinating about this is this sort of challenging question at the center of the story, which is whether or not we can continue to love someone for their personality, despite their outward appearance. We as humans, Beverly admits this, we as humans have certain limitations on how we build that love map in our heads. Well, we've all, we all see the other person, we listen to the other person, we get to know that personality. There are a multitude of facets that allow us to fall in love with somebody. But what if that changes? Whether it's by choice, by design, by accident, whatever that may be, this is still a really tough question to grapple with. And I don't think this story, even for 1 second, says to the audience, well, we've got it resolved for you.
Yeah.
There's not an easy solution here. It says, hey, what's weird about love is that we all readily accept and we all tell each other that we fall in love with people because of who they are, because of their personalities and the way they make us feel. But there's also this other part of that is sort of the physical representation of that person. And what happens when you change this? You were sort of working that area of talking about, well, what if somebody is transgendered or a transvestite or whatever that may be, that changes your outward perception of that person. Well, some people may very easily be able to step into that new role and say, well, yeah, I love that person for that personality. That's what I get out of it. And I can look past these outward traits. And there are other people who may not be able to get past that. And I don't think that this story is necessarily casting a judgment on either way. It's just saying that this is a complicated mess of human emotion, and everybody is going to have a different way to deal with it.
It's interesting, though, that Beverly says maybe one day we won't be so limited in the way we love. I mean, she actually sort of seems to see it as a failing.
Yeah,
that she can't get past it, or she's not willing to try to get past it. Which is, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it almost seems like Star Trek is saying, yeah, this is actually how it ought to be. But if you're not that way right now, well, you're no worse than Beverly Crusher.
Right. So there's a message.
We're no
worse than Beverly Crusher.
Well, no, but I mean, we all want to be the best that we can be, and we all want to be, whatever our ideals are. I mean, she's not there yet. I mean, she seems to say that her ideal would be, yeah, I love you for who you are, and who you are is who you are inside, not who you are on the outside. Right. But I'm not there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess it's aspirational. Although, again, I mean, I'm always kind of bummed when we get to the 24th century and we find out that people are still sort of like, oh, I wish I were a better person. We always want the 24th century people to be the best people they can possibly be. And when we come across somebody in the 24th century who's like, yeah, I know I should be better, but I'm not gonna. It's kind of a little bit of a bummer. I don't even know that any of that, though, is the message. And we've spent a lot of time sort of in the does the episode hold up part. What about messages, sir?
Yeah. Listen to your enemy. We kind of got the same lesson of diplomacy with Riva in Loud as a Whisper. So I brought that up earlier. So I think there was something there about that. But, like I said, to me, this episode is not so much about the message. It's not about the bonk bonk on the head. It's about the question. What is love? What does it mean to be in love with someone? And can that be changed? How do we adapt to that? Because there are all kinds of minor adaptations that we make, but is there a limit? And Beverly found her limit in this case. And again, I think what's good about this episode is that it doesn't really firmly come down on one side to say that Beverly is right or Beverly is wrong. It's just this is the way it is, and she is a person who gets to make that decision because it's her life and her relationship. So I like the idea of an episode that challenges the audience up to a point and does this a couple of times. I love, like I said, that it did it with Riker by putting this being into Riker. But then, like I said, at the end, I felt like we knew we sort of had to get there with the final form being something that Beverly just could not reconcile. So I'm much more interested in the challenge of this episode than necessarily a message. But I think there is a message in there. And like I said, maybe the diplomatic lesson was one that I picked up. What about you?
Yeah, the only messages that I think you can take away and say Star Trek was definitely saying this are what I've sort of referred to as gems. I mean, it's not what we were looking for, but it's like stuff that you sort of found while you were there. Yeah. In a way. Speak softly, Governor. Those who cannot hear an angry shout may strain to hear a whisper, is what Will Odon, I suppose, told the governor, which is great. I mean, so often if somebody comes at you with an argument and they come at you argumentatively with that argument, you're going to dig in your heels, or somebody else will. I mean, maybe it's best to not start the conversation by yelling. Maybe it's better instead to start the conversation, in conversation. So I love that. The speak softly and people might listen or might try to listen as opposed to just, closing their ears and going, la, 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 la. The other one I liked was, I love the way Odon says that the competing moods made peace decades ago. Their representatives trade places. They walked a mile in the other's shoes. They basically made themselves know the situation of the other before they, decided anything. A lot of times we see this, and I think occasionally it looks publicity stunty. Like I know there's a thing going around Silicon Valley right now. Can you eat on $2 a day? And it's a Silicon Valley thing because at the end of that time, they get to go back to eating whatever the heck they want. But I mean, it's a good thing to try. I mean, and I haven't. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that's a good thing to try. I'm holding up those kinds of things as examples to put yourself in someone else's shoes. We kind of need our actual leaders to do that. I think we need elected representatives to do that. Maybe judges as well. I don't know. I mean, there is definitely something to be said for really thinking about things. But if you don't know the experience, you won't know the experience. And if you're holding power over somebody else, maybe you ought to try to know a thing or two, like literally know what they're going through. Grok the fullness, if you will, as opposed to just, reading a sheet of paper saying, well, that looks terrible for them, but it looks really bad for these guys too, so I'm going to go with these guys. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I loved that idea. Yeah. As far as the interpersonal relationship thing, though, that the episode was actually about, I kind of want to apply a message to it. But the problem that I have is this whole thing starts with deception. Yeah. Odon knew something that he should have shared with her. And so you remember how bad Geordi made Leah Brahms feel for the way Geordi treated Leah Brahms? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I kind of feel like if we fault Beverly at all here, we're not exactly victim shaming, but she went into this eyes wide open. And the problem is the thing that she should have known was being hidden by the person that she was going there with. So I kind of can't fault her for anything that happens, because it's possible that he would have, that first night in 10 Forward when they met across the room, he might have said, funny story, look what I can do with my tummy. And she might have been, what do I care? I love you no matter who you are. And so then when he turns up in somebody else, she'd be like, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. Yeah. Anything that we struggle with in this episode and that she struggles with in this episode, I sort of have to be like, okay, but let's start at the very beginning, which is where Odon should have started. So, sure. I don't know. I do want to. I'm not normally I don't feel like I'm normally so, hey, listen, if I offended you at all, I'm sorry. But I want to be clear. Nothing that I said, I hope nothing I said will ever be taken in this episode as dismissive or making fun, except for the parts where I was obviously making fun. But nothing about this situation is easy to me, and nothing about the situation, honestly, is not something that I know a tremendous amount about from personal experience. Thank goodness I'm not making decisions for other people on it. But if it seems like I'm being dismissive at all, I'm absolutely not. And I'm not exactly apologizing for what I just said, but I want to make it clear I'm not trying to be dismissive in any way.
I don't think you have to worry about it. I mean, this episode is full of challenges. It's full of interesting ideas. And like I said, they're not trying to force feed you an answer.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's really effective about the show. And that's why I think, we can both say that those, as an episode, but also those challenges are what make this particular episode really hold up. So with that said, Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, executive producer Rod Roddenberry. You can find out more at roddenberry.com. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, check out Trek FM, that's trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
Next week, The Mind's Eye.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Promotional consideration for Mission Log provided by a green dishwashing liquid from the 20th century. Green dishwashing liquid from the 20th century softens hands while you talk over your love life. And transmission.